Thank you.
So official. Well, welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year. I wanted to say thank you to everyone who responded to phone calls and emails about continuing to serve. I know that for the folks that I had contacted, there were a lot of similar questions like, what would this year look like? And so tonight we're going to get into that a little bit. And I apologize if by not giving more of a response before now made it seem like I didn't appreciate your response. Just know that we did very much appreciate your response, your openness, your candor, and your willingness to continue, knowing that last year was not anything typical, and how we will continue to try to be really engaged moving forward. Just a side note, I was able to go to the opening on Saturday of the pop-up. I strongly encourage folks to go to the chapel and see it. It is moving. I really do appreciate the work that Myrick and others have done on that to bring that to the campus. So I won't say too much more. Are we going into minutes? I'll hand it right back over to you, Nick.
Awesome. Thanks. Yes, Shauna, that's a good reminder. Maybe we can ask Kate and Myrick to give a quick overview of the exhibit and pop-up museum, but I will put the agenda up and share my screen. We are moving into formal approval of our minutes. You should have the slideshow live for you. I just actually realized that I believe this is the ComCom member. Is this John Johnston? I can't tell. It kind of looks like him here. I will ask Eric to ask for approval of the minutes.
All right, guys, we're going to approve our meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was last year, and it's been uploaded to our SharePoint site for review. And before we approve them, we were just going to ask if there's any questions or concerns from the committee. If not, we're going to move forward with approving them. To simplify this, we're going to ask if there are any committee members who do not wish to approve the minutes. If not, then the minutes are approved and we can continue on with the meeting.
Great, thank you, Eric. We have a pretty light agenda today. We're using this meeting as our reset for the year. We are moving into a new year. We are updating our work plan for the committee, and we are setting our goals and our focus areas for the year. So the majority of this meeting will be discussing that, also discussing our proposed task forces for 2022, which will be led by the staff this committee, Brody, myself, and Kate Pierce. So we'll each discuss our task forces. We will do a brief icebreaker, since it has been several months since we've seen each other, and even longer since we've been in person. An easy, simple question to answer. Before we do that, Shauna was mentioning we spent some time with the leadership of this committee working through and looking at our committee roster. We had a number of members whose term was up, who served 1-year terms, and they had the opportunity to either roll off or continue to serve a second term, a full term, if they choose, of 3 years, or any length term. And Shauna and Jay led the conversations with these members. They also asked some really great questions about involvement from the previous year. What was great, what worked, what are areas to improve, and just feedback for us, which was much appreciated. So thank you for everyone for your time in those conversations. We've discussed those with the leadership of this committee and look forward to improving this upcoming year. I wanted to briefly put the list up. We still have a very large committee, although we did have a number, I think 4 committee members that rolled off. They were all very appreciative of the time. It was more of their ability to give time for this committee had changed, so they will no longer be with us. That's Brian, Vanessa, Ella, and Fionn, who we are very appreciative of them. We have a lot of committee members here today, so this list is still very long, so thank you all for your continued service. But just wanted to refresh, our number is more like 38 as opposed to 42 or 43 of last year. So I promised an icebreaker. We will do this. I would love to open up for the group just to get a little FaceTime with everyone. It's a very simple question. I am an aspiring fill in the blank. So I'm not going to call, I don't believe, on people just yet unless I have to, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We'll put the question in the chat. Maybe I will ask Kate, since she already put one into the chat, if she could just share hers, and then if you wouldn't mind just speaking up popcorn style, that would be awesome.
Sure. So Lauren knows this, but I kill every single houseplant that I receive. And my mom like brings me a houseplant every time she comes from Mississippi, and it's dead within 3 months. And so I need to learn how to keep plants alive in the house. And I'd like to do something in my yard as well. So one of the goals for 2022 is to not kill plants, or more positively, I'm an aspiring gardener. And I like kill cactus and snake plants. I kill all the easy plants to that stay alive for everyone else. So I think like Sarah and Lauren and others might be just shaking their heads at me, but I'm going to work better at that.
Okay, I'll go next. But Kate, I'm a little worried about the plants in the park if you have such an impact on the house and the garden.
They're only sunflowers.
Yeah, as I revealed a little while ago, I'm an aspiring Wordle solver. Not very good at it, but working at it. The new puzzle. It's fun. Try it.
Larry, yeah, go, Larry.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my roots and be an aspiring botanist, which I've been trying to get back to over the years. So I've been spending a lot of time in the Smokies, retracing some old haunts. So that's what I have in store for 2022.
I am an aspiring drummer. So at 60, I want to be in a rock and roll band.
Oh, wow.
Based on what I see these days, you're too young for that.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of them are getting pretty old out there. I think that's why I want to do it.
It's good.
What else?
I can go next. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
So as a retiree, I never thought about tutoring or anything like that until a family asked me. And it is it's very rewarding. I never thought I'd be doing this. So I am working with children whose families are a little frustrated that they've spent 2 years in a synchronous situation learning on the computer. And so they want their children to have more person-to-person instruction. And the kids are just adorable and just like little sponges. And I'm actually enjoying it.
I can go. This might be a bit ambitious, but I'm going to say I'm an aspiring mountaineer. I do a lot of hiking, but this year I want to climb something with snow at the top, inspired by the couple of Netflix documentaries I have recently watched about mountaineering.
So what's it going to be? What are your top 2 ideas here?
I have some friends out in Seattle, so we were thinking maybe Mount Baker or Rainier. I will keep you posted.
If you go Saturday, you can climb Grandfather Mountain. There'll
That's
be snow
right.
at the top.
Okay,
After you.
Danny Bell, I'm an aspiring tourist. I have not taken the time to do that, so I'm looking forward to some journeys. So if you have some favorite places that I should visit, send them my way.
Well, I'll go next. We just moved in the last few months, and now we have this big backyard. So I am an aspiring grower of fruit trees. So if anybody has any experience, I have clippings of a fig tree from a friend that I'm trying to propagate right now. So if anybody is really, ace at fig trees or other kinds of fruit trees, give me a holler. So maybe I'll bring figs to a future meeting. How's that?
I'll pop in next. This is Walter here. I am an aspiring runner, and I use that term loosely. I actually hate running, but still trying to drop some COVID weight and get so want to at least try to incorporate a little more cardio into my workout routine. So if anyone has any tips on how to get started with that or help, let me know.
I don't have any tips, but I will support you in the notion that running is terrible. Unless you're being
Yeah,
chased, I really can't understand the joy in it.
I appreciate that. Your support means everything. So
I will say that I am an aspiring world traveler. I am ready to dust off my passport and get out and see some things in the world. It's been great to get to, do a little bit of local traveling the last couple of years, but the passport's ready for some use.
So this is Amy. I'll jump in on the running bandwagon. Although actually, when I'm in shape, I actually enjoy it. But the problem is continuing that. So I've been a runner in the past and I'm aspiring to get back into it.
I'll go next. My name is Liana. And to follow up with what Carol said, I am also an aspiring drummer and trying to get back into learning bass. My partner has a drum set and a bunch of instruments. He's a musician and it's just like here in my house. And I never really bothered to practice at all, but I thought like maybe this year I'll actually like try to start utilizing all of the wonderful instruments that are in my house. So I look forward to trying to do that.
Has anybody seen the bagpipe players that gather at Dix Park on a regular basis? They play in that parking lot near the cemetery at late in the day. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to take your drums there, Liana.
Yeah, maybe I'll join them once I get good enough.
So there's always interesting things that happen at the park, but one of the most interesting was someone brought out their full drum kit into the middle of the big field and just was like going at it. I mean, and it had like the cymbals and whatever, the whole drum kit was out in the middle of the big field and this guy was rocking out. So there's a goal. You and Carol can bring out drum kits and we'll set up a little drum circle.
Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting, honestly, to have like a bunch of instruments out on the big field. That's pretty cool. I hope to see that one day or maybe partake in something like that.
I'll go next. I am an aspiring pizza chef. We got a pizza oven for our wedding last September, and we finally broke it out and started to use it. But it's a little bit more complicated than you may think in terms of like using the peel and making your own dough and kind of figuring out your toppings and whatnot. So we've had one unmitigated disaster where all the pizza had to be thrown away, and then we had to like crank the uni on to like burn off all of the debris, and then we had a second attempt that went better. But now I want to get to the point where I can like start tossing the dough and having some fun with it. So yeah.
I'm an aspiring writer of sorts. I've got 2 books that I've got in my head and partly going. It's going to take a while. One is a redo of a book I did about 15 years ago. And you'll be amused, Kate, in particular. If you have a new copy of that book, you can sell it for about $450. Who knew? So it's time to redo that book.
Which book was that, Myrick?
Pardon?
What was the name of what was the original book's name?
Buying Time for Heritage.
I think I have a copy of that.
You might have a copy of that. It may be worth more than you thought.
Wow.
Who knew? So And
Is
then
it a murder
the other
mystery?
one that sits out there is there is a book to be done, not necessarily one writer, but there's a book to be done on the Black architects and builders. It's such a rich subject. Man, it is a rich subject.
I'll go next. I just need to get some more organization in my life. So I'm an aspiring person that needs to get some organization. We need to downsize and declutter, and that's my next task, and I'm ready to go.
I can go. I'm Stephanie. I am traveling currently. I'm in Utah visiting some friends from college. And we spent a couple mornings this trip. One of my friends, I ended up meeting someone who plays hockey in the area. So we spent a couple mornings this trip out on frozen lakes, skating around, which is when I had the opportunity to pick up a hockey stick for the first time in my whole life. And it was so much fun. So maybe I'm an aspiring hockey player. I don't know. I have to look into that.
I got a bike over the holidays, so I'm just trying to get back into cycling and checking out all the greenways and going to Dix Park via I guess it's Walnut Creek to like Reedy Creek. So there's so many awesome greenways. So just trying to like figure out how to get around with the bike.
All right, I'll jump in there. So having spent a few years in Australia and coming back, and then with COVID, it's not really that easy to meet people and all that stuff. So I'm an aspiring Raleigh tourist. I feel like enough has changed in 3 years, and I need to kind of get my bearings straight. And so far, it's been pretty exciting.
I'll just open it up. I know we have a couple guests and staff, Lauren, Stephen, and anyone else. Please feel free to hop in here.
I'll go ahead. Ann Franklin here. I go to a gym where the Raleigh Firebirds work out, and my goal is to make 8 out of 10 shots. I'd like to say I could make a 3-pointer. If I did a 3-pointer, you all will hear about it. And the other thing I want to tell Kate is that all of my plants live in sight of the dumpster. So if they don't live, they get taken to the dumpster. So it's sometimes a little threat is important to gardeners. And I'm very inspired by everybody else. The other thing is that I think this year I'm gonna try to learn how to hang out. I'm not very good at that. And I've observed other people who are really good at it, and I'm putting that on my list.
Ann, you hang out. I've hung out with you enough, and I know you hang out. And we've traveled major cities. We've hung out in major cities, and we've traveled together. I love the garden. Kate knows this, but I aspire to grow something different. So I have like these things that I grow that I'm really good at. And now I got to figure out, I got to challenge myself to grow something differently. And I'm inspired by hearing everybody's interest tonight.
I'll go, Ebony. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'd say I'm an aspiring motivational speaker. Lately, I've done a lot of podcasts. Done a lot of podcasts and started a business this year, and so I've had a lot of opportunity to talk to people and whatnot, and kind of do my elevator pitch, but also just inspire and talk to different people that relate to my business, but also what I do from day to day. So that's my thing. And then also I'll tack on to Walter. Running. I'm trying to get back into running and do a 10K. I'm trying to do City of Oaks this year. So anybody else is trying to do that one, we can all pass out together.
I'll jump in. I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
Okay, Jenny here. I am an aspiring woodworker. I have always wanted to learn how to do it, but I have always been incredibly intimidated. My husband's actually gotten very good at it in the last few years. So I usually just let him do projects and watch from a long ways away. But in our line of work, the things that we do, it's something I really need to learn how to do. And so that is going to be my goal for this year. And I guess I'll jump in real quick. I'm kind of biting off someone else. My family, I also just moved into a new home, and decluttering is the goal for 2022. So I guess aspiring minimalist with an asterisk sign, something practical for me. Yeah.
Hey, this is Bill. I'll jump in. I'm an aspiring cyclist, in part because I don't want to ever run again. So I really enjoy cycling. It's great. It's way easier on my knees as I've aged. We have a great greenway system, so I love it. It's a lot of fun, and that's what I'm aspiring to be. But I don't have all the gear, so I don't look like one. I don't have like the fancy shirts and stuff. So I'm building up to that.
I'll jump in real quick. This is Lauren. I am an aspiring jeweler. I am taking an enameling class at Pullen Art Center, and it is super fun. I really love jewelry, earrings in particular, and so I decided one way to maybe curb my habit is to make my own. So that's my plan. So I got one class now and then another one in April. So.
This is Sarah. I do garden, I do run, and I love to declutter. I'm very uncluttered. So if anybody wants to talk about that, I'd be happy to. I did send Walter a message about running. And I've been in the pandemic becoming a dog groomer. Y'all would not want to see my dog right now. He's got a little bit too much cut off, but I worked on my husband a lot, and I never cut his ears and or nicked his ears. And but then finally he started going back to the barber, but I have 2 pairs of clippers and I'm still doing the dog. I haven't cut his toenails yet, but I do clip him.
Last time I saw Terry, he was wearing a hat, Sarah. Was that?
There's a good barber near Myrick's office that does a much better job than I do. But I do the hot towels on the neck and the massage in the scalp, and so he says I'm too slow.
I'm not going to force folks. I know Brody and I still have to go, but I do see a couple people who haven't spoken yet. So if you want to, we'd love to hear from you.
I like you subtly give a little shade there, Nick. Fine, I'll go. I'll tell you, I struggled with this when we talked about it on Friday, and I feel like I either want to be really funny and say like I aspire to retire, which is very factual, or like more personal, like this year I just have decided I just need to be way more patient than is normal for me. And so I aspire to give and receive more grace. So there's that.
I can go next. Being just new in North Carolina and a lot of my extended family and family not being here, I aspire to be a baker. I was here for Thanksgiving and some of the holidays and kind of realized that there's so many of the dishes that I used to love eating I couldn't make nor have access to. And so I'd rather take it upon myself to figure out the recipes of my grandma and my mom and figure out how to, bake and try to remake all the desserts that they know how to make. So aspiring baker. And if anyone wants to be the guinea pig to try my desserts, let me know.
Amen. Yes.
Sounds good.
All right, Nick.
Yeah. Okay. If you feel led, you can join in the chat to our fun game. I'm an aspiring chess player. I'm too scared to play other people still, so I'm doing puzzles now. But I've enjoyed that. Some simple to do and learn. So Brody, we're ready to share screen and keep on rolling. Thanks for everybody's answers. That was really fun. So as Brody pulls that up, we'd like to share a couple focus areas for the year. We spent some time with the leadership of this committee, Shauna, Eric, and Jay, and staff, thinking through priorities and how to better what was a tough year, and I think a first year for this committee being back after the master planning process with new members. Brody, we can go down to the focus areas. And we had a couple takeaways. Primary one and a pitfall that I think we all agreed was we spent a lot of time last year, and we will continue to do so, but updating this committee on everything that's happened. We love doing that. I think folks love learning about the park, but it may have taken too much time, maybe one directional, unidirectional information sharing from us to y'all. And we aspire to be more engaging, more participatory. And that may mean a little bit less on the update side. We could give updates for a full hour and a half every couple months and not make any progress in some things that we need input and engagement on. So we're going to dovetail that back. We'll share information, the same information over email. And in other ways, we encourage you to sign up for our newsletters. Both the conservancies and the cities are incredibly comprehensive and very well put together. So I encourage you, if you're not signed up, I assume everyone here is, to sign up for those as one point of information. But as we look at this upcoming year, we've really decided upon 3 primary focus areas that we'd like to present today and have a discussion around. The first, we have a proposed bond set for November of this year. You remember a lot of our meetings last year, and for those aware of City of Raleigh and how these parks bond works, this has been a deferred bond, and it is tied to the election cycle, and with the delay of the election cycle, the bond was also delayed. So we are optimistic that this will be on the slate for November. And how the city runs these parks bonds is there is an advocacy campaign to support the passage of what is clearly a major funding source for parks projects across the park system. Included in that is Dix Park. And so this campaign is traditionally ran by the Chamber of Commerce. The Dix Park Conservancy has been a partner when it's existed, which is in the past 6 years. And we expect this relationship will be similar. The Conservancy has said that we'll have this role in this upcoming Parks Bond campaign. And both the city and the Conservancy see value in this group, the Community Committee, the representative group for Dix Park project, being involved in a couple different ways on the strategy side, on the engagement side, and on the communication side. And I remember a conversation, Jay, we had about using this group in building the value statement for the park and having conversations and discussions with this group on how to position this parks bond and Dix Park's inclusion for support from the community. What will resonate, what information can be shared, what statements we can make that would elicit a positive response in support of this parks bond. And we feel that the successful passage of this bond, and we'll get into the details of this as we get into our meetings this year, is critical for the success of this park. And we know one specific project, the Play Plaza, recently renamed the Gibson Play Plaza, is a major line item on this bond. And so what we feel is very important to have a discussion with this group as we're in the community and sharing this message in support of. And that statement is from the Conservancy, who was able to advocate for the bond, the city in our role here, and we are a committee of both the city and the Conservancy, so we need to be aware of that. The city is putting out information about the bond and is not advocating. That's the Conservancy's role. So we'll talk about how our responsibilities differ there and how we as committee members can be involved. So that's our first committee focus area. I'm going to go through all 3 of these, and then we'll open it up for some discussion. Actually, I'm going to directly pass this off to Brody. Brody's leading separate from the city side. So our second committee focus area is around our cultural interpretation plan that is scheduled to start. I should say Brody and Lauren are leading the separate here shortly. So Brody?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nick. So as I think a lot of you all on the community committee are aware of and kind of spoke to in terms of sentiments around what you would like to see in the park, the cultural interpretive plan was a focus area that was sort of articulated in those working groups related to the master plan. And so the city is putting out an RFQ to invite firms to submit qualifications to develop a cultural interpretive plan for the park. And in terms of sort of what this looks like, we would invite firms to submit basically an application that kind of articulates the responses of the types of services that we would like to sort of solicit from a firm that would include everything from storytelling, using some of the stories, sentiments, and history in the historical context of Dix Park, and being able to create more of a comprehensive, interpretive way of sort of expressing and highlighting all the history, which is really multi-layered and multifaceted, as you all know. We believe as the city and the Conservancy that, you all are a huge stakeholder in that, just in terms of strategy, being able to sort of ground truth some of the information that will be embedded in the RFQ in a way that is reflective of what you all said, engagement, just being a stakeholder and us updating you on the process, because we were going through an interview process where we accept applications from firms and then have a review team that's comprised of folks from the city to score the applications, to then bring on those who meet the best qualifications. And then obviously, I've already alluded to this, but the buy-in, you all are a big stakeholder in buying into the process, both from the standpoint of the content, which is embedded in the RFQ, but also giving you all feedback on the firms and how we scored them, and just keeping you along in the whole process. And so just in terms of the partners outside of the consultant that we secure, the Legacy Committee is another stakeholder that we've identified as a group that can really provide relevant feedback to our process. And Lauren, I'm not sure if you would like to add anything, but Lauren and I are both working on this along with Kate, Nick, and others, but we are projected to have it posted this Friday. And so if folks know any groups or any entities that may find this of use for them to respond to, please let us know.
I think you covered it, Brody.
Cool.
And we will have some time, because we do want to have some discussion around this. So we'll have some time for this. So don't feel like we need to have questions just yet. Kate, if you wouldn't mind sharing our third focus area. This is a continuation of some work that this group worked on in our previous year. So Kate.
Yeah, so in addition to kicking off the cultural interpretive planning process, we're also kicking off a study that's going to look at the buildings and infrastructure as it relates to kind of the real estate function of the park. And in that discussion, the idea of how will partners, what kind of partners do we want to help us potentially redevelop or reoccupy buildings? What are the criteria we're using to select those future real estate partners? And we started this work last year, but we will be bringing on a consultant team and working with a group called the Development Finance Initiative at UNC Chapel Hills School of Government to help us really create a framework to not only evaluate the buildings in terms of their potential for redevelopment, but evaluate partners and their potential to contribute to the future of the park. And so this will be a continuation of last year's task force, but will be a lot more focused on the work surrounding the real estate opportunity at the park.
Kate, within that development finance initiative, who are you working with out of that group? Is that Jeannie Milliken Bond's team, or is that a different group? Because her practice is in that space out there, and she's got a team that's working similarly in other areas.
Yeah, it is. And Stephen, help me with name. It's Marcia and Eric Thomas, or Thomas Eric. He has like 3 names and they're all first names, but they're also his last name. So,
Yeah,
but
Eric Thomas.
Eric Thomas, that's right. So, and
He's the
Marcia.
primary project manager.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Bill. Yes, those 2 people.
Awesome. Yeah, they're great. Jeannie used to be with the Federal Reserve Bank in West Virginia, but then moved back, and she was former Knightdale mayor and now at the School of Government and School of Law. And she's working on her whole, she's professor of practice over there. Her whole practice is in helping communities rethink development initiatives for social good. So she may be someone to connect with. I know I can make an introduction if that's something you need, or if you
Yeah,
already know
that'd be
her,
great, Jay. Yep.
Great. I think that if it makes sense, Brody, we'll continue right on to our committee involvement options, and then we'll have our discussion, because the task force are very similar to our focus areas. So it may be weird to separate that now. So I think we're going to move straight into this next section. We will have questions on our focus areas because we want to make sure that those align with the committee's interests, and that we're being clear about how that will look for committee involvement. But speaking of involvement, another question that we had from some of our reports at end of year, and something that we thought about how it could potentially, and at least wanted to clarify today, were ways that we as committee members can be involved in. And we really identified 4 primary ways of involvement. The first, and this is kind of what we think as baseline for being a committee member, this is participation in our committee meetings and activities. Our meetings are currently quarterly. We have the opportunity to have 2 additional special meetings, but at least quarterly meetings. There is some pre-work. But this is the baseline for being an active member of the committee. And that generally would be predominantly in meeting.
Nick, you might be cutting out. I don't know if it's just me or if everybody's. Yep.
Yeah, it was cutting out on my end a little bit too.
Okay, Brody, I'll just have you present and I'll switch Wi-Fi. That work?
Sounds good. So as Nick was alluding to, we identified 4 focus areas for community involvement, and we highlighted the first one just as a baseline, coming to the meetings, engaging. Meetings are quarterly, but subject to change depending on, sort of areas of interest, topics of discussion, things of that nature. Yeah, the second piece is volunteering at events and projects. As you all know, we host a lot of events at Dix Park on a regular basis. We actually have a projected list of events that I think are out quarterly, if I'm not mistaken. And so being able to sort of get ahead of that and engage you all with those opportunities or things that we were or one of the things we're most interested in for this year. And we think it's a great way for you all to be ambassadors of the park, sort of get acclimated with sort of the new programming and events that we host, and just being a great steward. Number 3, which Nick alluded to as well, is being involved with the task forces. We identified 3 just in terms of big buckets of work that we will be embarking on for this year. And we wanted to sort of provide space for folks who have both expertise and interest in those focus areas to sort of, think through how they see themselves contributing, because, we want this task force to be a working group that is relatively nimble in how we move, but, there will be expected deliverables that aren't sort of super deep in terms of like a lot of work, but it's going to be more than just kind of basic involvement, or baseline involvement rather. And then the community conversations, this would be going on monthly. And this is sort of, the idea around this is to create space and opportunities for folks like yourselves to, for us to hold space for folks like yourselves to provide either input, topics of discussion, things that are relevant to the park. We're still trying to figure out how we want it sort of structured in a way that we don't have to be so planning heavy for these spaces, but ultimately just provide space for you all to have conversations. And Nick and I, if not both of us, will be on those calls monthly, and with also sort of prompts around some of the work that we're doing. So if folks just want to come in and just, organically engage, we're able to do that as well. So yeah, I think everything is covered. Nick, are you back?
I think so, and apologies if I'm breaking up again, just let me know. Brody, there was another slide that just basically described what you said there for the conversations. I will say maybe we won't promise every month we'll hold them, generally monthly, and we'll make sure that if there are specific relevant topic for the day, we'll share that, but we do want this to be as unstructured of a space as we can make it make sense. So our last item today, and this is going to take a long time to present because we want this to be mostly discussion based, are our task forces for the year. So if you remember, we had 3 task forces in 2021. I think overall we found that the task force model in terms of involvement was productive, was a good way to allow folks who desired additional engagement to be engaged on topics and areas that they were passionate of and had expertise in. So we'd like to continue that. We're shifting a little bit on how these will work, in that the management of them looks different this year, and I'll explain kind of by task force. So we are going to continue on with having an equity task force. For those of us in the equity task force, we found that to be a really valuable space. And we discussed what it could look like. We spent last year reviewing the equity planning work to date for the park. And where we left it was, it would be great to have this equity task force serve really as a resource group. Less on the actual planning design and more on the park, and is going through a lot of changes. There are a lot of decisions being made, and we should be taking an equity lens on all of those decisions. And so our plan for this year is to use this as a resource group for timely matters. Let's say that the cultural interpretive plan is at a place where it's doing some stakeholder analysis, and we plan a meeting with the equity task force to review this group, to provide additional suggestions, recommendations. So using this as a resource group, a standing group that will be topic based across the year was a recommendation, and we think as staff for this committee that that's a great idea. And we invite folks that serve in this task force to continue serving with us if that's still of interest. The second one, and I'm just going to briefly go through these. We do think it's valuable as a major focus area to have a task force solely dedicated to the cultural interpretive plan. This actually will be a joint effort with the Legacy Committee. There are 2 major stakeholder groups for the cultural interpretive plan, and that's this committee, the Community Committee, and the Legacy Committee. And so when I have a consultant here in brackets and staff above, that's really who's managing this work. We will have, and this differs for both the cultural interpretive plan and the partnership stakeholder, we'll have a consultant that will be managing how this task force is being used. So we'll have a dedicated to the cultural interpretive plan. Obviously, our task forces will continue to work to report out to our full committee. So there will be communication there. But for folks who have specific interests in the legacy aspect of this, the history aspect, I hope you'll find a place and interest in serving on this task force. And then the third one is, as Kate mentioned, this is also a continuation of the partnerships task force that existed last year. It will be focused on this discrete effort led by DFI. So we will have a consultant involvement here, but this will be the group that will help us on our partnership strategy, partnership determination of how community groups are involved at the park, how we select partners and prioritize them. So I said we're not going to be very presentation heavy. I'd love to open it up on multiple topics.
Nick, what about the bond task force?
So we don't have a bond task force.
Okay, so that's just everybody.
Yes, that's right. It'll be a larger committee focus.
Okay.
We had determined, Kate, that we may not need this, but again, the whole point of today, we're presenting what we as leadership had thought would make sense for this year, and we'd love to hear from the full committee. Do these align with our interests? What's missing in terms of work that you see happening at the park that you want to be involved in? What are other ways that you'd like to be involved. Do these resonate with you? And we'd love to hear any questions that we could answer today.
This is my, in the cultural interpretive plan and or this partnership, is it on y'all's radar screen that an updated National Register nomination is needed? Because it takes 2 years to get that done now. I mean, not 2 years from starting, it's 2 years from when you send it to the state for the first time. It takes 2 years. Tax credits have been renewed through 2030, so we're in good shape there. But there needs to be, in this process, somebody needs to be updating the National Register nomination. There are a couple of really flawed issues with the old one that need to be addressed.
It's something we've talked about, Myra. That's good to know kind of the timing on those. And so, yeah, I need to think about where that fits, which group that fits into. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, and if whoever's Brody or Nick, will y'all take down the screen so we can see all the faces?
Brody, go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I think just at a high level, a cultural interpretive plan that, you know, makes sense. And I've talked with Janet a little bit as on a sidebar about it. But can you tell us more about like what that means? I think especially for those of us who, you know, don't kind of do this day to day, and maybe even give an example of a cultural interpretive plan.
Yeah, Brody, you want to go ahead?
Oh, and my question is like almost identical to Charles's. And then could you tell me as you do that, what you're looking for in that consultant?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically the goal of this plan is really develop site-specific, culturally responsive approaches for highlighting moments in Dix Park history that in sort of the purpose is to elevate historical and cultural consciousness and really reveal underlying meaning and voices. And so what that looks like is a consultant who has sort of qualifications and competencies in storytelling, using stories to sort of amplify ways in which we can interpret things other than verbally or sort of in spoken word. These examples of this or exhibits, if anyone has gone to Chavis Park, that's a great example of an interpretive plan being passed and using interpretation of the history of Chavis Park to amplify and tell stories about that space. And so ultimately, some of the other parks who have done this in terms of just like a best practice and or just looking at other jurisdictions, a lot of tribal communities in the Pacific Northwest where I'm from, a lot of those parks have cultural interpretive plans because so much, as I'm sure you all know, so much of our history tends to get erased or not thought of or not highlighted or not amplified based off of a lot of reasons, particularly in built environments. And so a lot of these cultural interpretive plans are really rooted in racial equity and equity as a whole to really amplify and give voice to stories that have oftentimes been sort of left on the wayside. And so for park goers, in terms of just like what does this look like, it would be, you know, an experience where you're able to see representations of pieces of history and context kind of illustrated in really creative ways in which the consultant is going to create a plan for. And so what we want within this sort of firm in terms of qualifications is a team that has a multidisciplinary background that really, you know, includes a track record for doing these plans because they have been done. Also experience with this group having research skills, storytelling skills, facilitating larger groups and being able to discuss sensitive information and being able to be culturally specific to that history and how we tell that story. Because the thinking behind that is around Dix Park's history and how, you know, there is so much and it's multi-layered and there's multiple perspectives. And I think the way to do justice by the park is being able to highlight those stories, particularly the ones that of communities that have been marginalized. And so, you know, it's just one another expression of being able to elevate consciousness by using built environment and storytelling within parks. And I think I answered both your question was two-pronged, right?
There are a couple of firms that, I mean, there's a lot of groups out there that hopefully will come together and respond. But if you're doing some Googling just to see examples of firms that have done work like this, first of all, there's the Cultural Landscapes Foundation that has done this work historically. There's a group out of Canada called Lord Cultural Resources. There's a group out of DC. What are they named, Brody? 106.
Yeah, 106. Yep.
Yeah. And so there are teams and firms that specialize in this. I think one of the things that Brody and Lauren have been very mindful of is the intersectionality of all of this history and how do we talk about it in a way that is honest and open, but is also, it connects people to this place. And so we're really excited about the work. We actually got money in the state budget to kick this work off, which was really great. And so that's one of Representative Ensko's kind of things she got was some money to do this work. And so it was a direct grant to the city to do it. So that was a big win for us.
Can we make sure that Cherry Hospital in Goldsboro is a pretty big component of this study? Because you can't talk about Dix without talking about Cherry.
I think that's a really good point, Myrick. One of the things that we have talked about is the history is so complex on our site and is so multi-layered and so intersectional that the history and the stories and the things that we need to unpack and learn about goes well beyond the boundaries of the 308 acres of Dix Park. And yet we need to figure out how we interpret that and display that and share that and partner with people around that within the 308 acres of Dix Park. And I think that's where our biggest struggle, or where we know we're at a roadblock of, we need some help in figuring out what the framework is around that and how do we move forward in doing that in a very equitable and rich way. We've made some steps, we've done some programming, we've done some signage, we have a history exhibit going on, but like, how do we move into that next step to really make sure that when we're making those choices, whether it's a project like Play Plaza, or it is another exhibit or a program that we want to hold to highlight something around history that's connected to the park or the greater area, that we're doing that in sort of a really intentional way. And so this is sort of that next step in figuring out a framework for staff, for our committees, for others in the community, on how to do that well and with intention.
And I was going to say, if you're going to Cherry, then we might want to think about going to Lumbee Land in Robertson County and Kahari Land in Sampson County, because there's a large number of American Indians that were included in here in an early time. And there's our story has never been told really completely. And I know there's a lot of effort to include us, but there's some faculty at UNC Pembroke. There's one at MIT that has worked on the American Indians spending time at Dix Park, and they're interested in being a part of the conversation. So whenever you get ready to go out, let me know. I'll share their information, and you can go directly to them as far as if it's appropriate, as far as their involvement in what you plan to do.
That's great, Danny. I think that's exactly what we're hoping to be able to do, is also identify the groups and the folks who we've not had that much engagement with and discussions with, and be able to learn from folks and bring others into the discussion and into the process.
I'd like to note that when the park was getting underway with our planning, we took the planning process to some of the parks and rec sites and had young people engaged with what they would like to see. And they drew pictures and they had what they wanted to tell. So I understand that we want to have something that works for our site, but I think we have the opportunity to sort of send up a flag that says that our entire community values the stories of the people in it. And so that can take us to some sites that are off the park. We have a lot of people who have never been on the site ever. And yet we have and continue to think of Dix Park as a leader for the entire community. So I'll be looking not just for what we can do on site, but how we model exploration of our stories and our history throughout the community. I know that's a big ask, but I think if we do that, we will surpass the simplest ways of signage and pathways, et cetera.
Carol, did I see your hand was raised?
Yeah, I'm wondering how you see the intersection of all of these committees, because, you know, the sites that you're considering interpreting, you know, may or may not remain extant on the site. You know, if one group decides that all of these buildings are torn down, how do you organize that with people doing cultural research and so forth? How are they going to all intersect? Even the equity task force intersects with the other two. So that's the basic question.
Yeah, it's a good question. How do we not only like work in these task forces, but bring them all together so that we can have cross task force discussions? I think we'll be able to do that. And thankfully, good or bad, there are only a handful of staff actually working on all of this. It's the people you see on this call, and we're always talking and working together. So while Brody and Lauren will be working the cultural interpretive plan, I'll be right there with them. While I'll be leading the partnership study, Brody and Lauren will be right there with me. So there's going to be a lot of cross networking at the staff level. And then we need to figure out the structure to make sure this committee has that kind of cross pollination as well. So you know, things we've done in the past, we're having kind of like larger work group or larger community committee meetings where we all talk about it and then break out into small groups and then come back. So we'll make sure that we figure out a way to do that so that information isn't lost across the task forces. But I'll say, from my perspective, the cultural interpretive plan and the building and partnership work, this is the most important work we will have done since the master plan. It really sets up the park for its next evolution. So it's really critical work, and I'm glad we're kicking them both off this year.
So where do we stand on the bond? I wasn't clear on what Nick said about that. Did we deal with that as a committee of the whole? And what's our role there? There's always that some things, some groups can advocate and some can't if they have a city connection. And are we clear on what we can do and what's our plan to get whatever it is we can do done? Because that's another crucial moment for the park, right? Coming up quick.
Bill, I'll respond first and then open up to the rest of the team. Yes, so we had discussions when we were building our list kind of priorities, and it's clearly a focus area for both staff teams, city and conservancy, and for this committee. The decision to not include it as a task force in our proposed list here was because it was seen to be an effort for the full group. So we'll most likely have some of our early meetings as the chamber and the conservancy are putting together their outreach strategy in this early part of the year. So spring, into winter, spring, and then into the summer on the engagement side. So earlier, the strategy, which will engage the full group. So we'll most likely have a fully dedicated committee meeting to the bond, and there'll be some outcomes from that. And then there will also be some asks. We talked about volunteering in terms of committee involvement. There will also be some asks of the full committee in terms of getting out to the community and having these discussions. So again, if we would like to have a dedicated work task force on the bond, we're open to that. We have 3 groups currently, and that number was good for us last year. So that was the thinking behind our list. But Bill, definitely agree. It is a massive priority for the city and the Conservancy, and one that we will bring most likely to this we'll bring them this first to the committee in our upcoming meetings.
And Stephen, I'll ask you to jump in. One of the ways this manifested in previous years was that a city staff person and a community person would go out to X community group, Y community group. The city staff person would be able to say, here's all the information about the bond. The community advocate would say, vote for the bond. And so that's kind of the distinguishing roles between what we see as what the community committee members could do and what our role as city staff is. So city staff can't directly advocate for the bond, but y'all as representatives of the community committee in the park can take on that voice of advocacy, whereas we can just provide information. So Stephen, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
No, I think that's you're accurate, Kate. I would expect the council to talk about the bond in March at the retreat, and hopefully finalize projects and their priorities in April to May. And usually it's the summertime, so it's June, July, August, September. And Kate's right, we match a city staff person to say, here's the facts. And then an advocate says, would you be willing to vote? And for a comparison, in 2014, we did about 80 presentations. So we hit the community, and different organizations, companies, we'll go where whoever wants a presentation, we go, regardless of their interest, support, or not. We've gone to several different, the kind of like the anti-tax groups of Wake County. We went and presented to them and talked to them and had constructive conversations. So it's a pretty busy summer. So.
And Stephen, can we members of the community committee advocate for passage, or are we too close to the city?
Bill, that's a great, so usually our entire Parks Board volunteers for this, and they ask for a vote. So yes, you can advocate for some, or ask someone to vote for it. It is just as a pure city employee, you cannot ask someone. So that's a great question, Bill.
Thanks.
And the other, I think, important piece is the community committee is a joint committee of the city and Conservancy. The Conservancy is going to have a larger role with this bond in support of the chamber's work. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of this discussion will also be led by the Conservancy staff, of which Nick is, I don't know if y'all know this, but Nick is transitioned to Chief of Staff for the Conservancy. So he is officially a Conservancy employee and can help lead that discussion with this group on this. So yeah, sorry, Nick, didn't mean to steal your, but yeah, Nick's Chief of Staff for the Conservancy now.
Thank you both. That's very helpful.
So Nick, I had 2 other quick ideas about things this committee might work on at some point. One was there were so many enthusiastic bike riders during the I Aspire to Be part of the program. It made me wonder, when some of these bike rides get organized, we should look at the connection between the park and the greenway segments that link up to the park along Walnut Creek, coming down Rocky Branch, and other ways. It would give us a great way to get out and about, and also think about the park and its relationship to the greenway system. I think there are more there are probably some ideas about connections that nobody's come up with yet that could make a positive difference for the park and the greenways. Plus, it would be a fun outing, you know. So, and then the one other thing I thought would be of interest to the committee would be a closer connection with our Conservation Corps crew and program over the coming year. I was inspired to talk to those folks and the work they did this summer, and loved how proud they were of the trail they built and other things. I'd love to give them an audience of this committee and see what ideas our committee has about ways to support them and encourage them and expand that. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. We had talked about a joint volunteer opportunity, maybe even something that the Conservation Corps could lead for us for this committee, which I think would be a great way. But definitely involving them, asking them to come and present to this group when we meet also would be very helpful. They were incredible last year, so we're very excited to continue that partnership.
Could I ask a quick question?
Please.
I was wondering if you could give us an update about kind of the development that's planning to happen in the Fuller Heights neighborhood and across, you know, on Lake Wheeler Road. I had a number of friends send me some articles over the holiday break that were concerning from their perspective and mine. And I just yeah, wanted to get an update about that. Yeah, to hear more.
Sure, I can jump in, and ironically, Lauren and I were talking about that today. So the Fuller Heights, so let me back up. During the master plan process, we became very aware that any type of a public investment, whether it be investment in a park or a transit line or infrastructure, causes gentrification. For parks specifically, it's referred to as green gentrification. And so during the master plan process, we recognized the vulnerability of the Fuller Heights Carolee neighborhood and really worked with council to get what's now referred to as the EDGE study going, which was looking at how can the city create policy or recommendations or incentives to, one, not anti-displacement measures, but two, also affordability measures. And that study is underway. I think there were some misleading things in those articles. We know that a lot of that land is industrial and was purchased by large-scale developers. Those developments have been approved by council, so there's not much from a park perspective we can do to kind of stop the transition of the neighborhood. But I will also note that and again, I will speak a little bit out of turn here, but from my perspective, one of our only opportunities to really address affordability is through density. And while I don't know whether or not what the mix of those developments will be in terms of market and density, or market and affordable, density in the right locations is really critical to a community's successful affordability strategy. So the EDGE study is supposed to come out with recommendations that address displacement, that address affordability. But I will say, if you look at Raleigh and you look at the neighborhoods proximate to downtown, this is not just a Dix Park issue. This is every affordable neighborhood in and around downtown Raleigh. So what you've got working is investment in a park, investment in bus rapid transit, proximity to downtown, all having market influence over a low to medium income, predominantly renter occupied neighborhood. And that's really challenging from a policy perspective on what do you do there. I don't want to put Larry on the spot, but I also know he worked on the South Saunders Gateway study that also looked at this exact area probably 8 or so years ago, and how that area could redevelop over time. Is gentrification real and happening in our community? Yes. Is it part of the city's responsibility to think about policies and recommendations to address affordability and to look at anti-displacement measures, yes, and that's the purpose of the EDGE study. And so I think what we have to be mindful of is, as a park, we not only kind of identified this issue, but we catalyzed the EDGE study starting off, and how we use the park and the park benefit to, now this is not one for one, right? But we are so intentional about our programming, about affordability within the park. There are things that we can control in terms of promoting equity inside the park that we have to be mindful of. It's the externalities that we have less control over as a park developer, or as a community committee, that I know a lot of the article is addressing. But I would like everyone to understand, for example, the city did not kick out tenants, right? That was a developer who owned that property who alerted their tenants that they then had to move. So there was a little bit of reporting that could have been cleaned up in some of those articles too. I could probably talk about this all night, but I do think it's important to just understand kind of the underlying growth impacts on the Fuller Heights Care Lee, and what the city can do and what the city can't do, because we're part of a larger market economy. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything. And I also, the EDGE study, it might be just helpful to send out where the EDGE study is, because that was really why they did that work.
Okay, I would say that was a really good summary. The plans along Lake Wheeler have been approved, but I think one of the things that we could do, generally as a committee, is to educate developers and make sure that good urban design practices and linkages and the things that Bill was talking about of connectivity can happen on private sector properties too, as well, particularly when they're multi-phase developments of that scale. So looking at ways for developers to be a good neighbor. Affordability is a tough one, but there's always room for good design and thoughtful design to enhance the edge along in the connectivity along Lake Wheeler.
And Kate, I'll just add, I know this is a conversation, I think, about those communities we've been having since when we were, the Master Plan Advisory Committee was first convened. And one thing that this group really has the ability to do, I think Larry, you said it really well, it's to be an educator. One thing our community, as it's growing from a town to a mid-sized city, a mid-sized city to a national city, lacks is understanding the mechanisms of how local government influences practice. And as a person who is engaged in the local government, as this committee is, it's our responsibility to go back and educate our friends, our circles of influences, our colleagues, other people that we come across with what is within the purview of local government and what is not, and how then can we leverage our influence as voters to then get the change we want. And if there are pieces of information, resources, education, or questions, it's important that this group feels as though they can ask those questions transparently here, so that those materials can be readily made available to us to have those conversations. It is not acceptable, I may be speaking out of turn, to shy away from those conversations because you don't have that information. It's our responsibility to go seek that information out, and we are privileged that we have this forum to get it. And so it's important that all of us, so I appreciate you asking the question, Simone, because it's critical that we have that so that we can get Kate to update us, so that we can get Nick to share the EDGE study in the chat, so we can get Larry's input as an expert. It's a really unique mix that has been selected here. And so please continue to bring those concerns up, and not just as it relates to Dix Park, but considering this is a park for everyone and it's going to be connecting other parts of the city. As you have questions, bring it to this group so we can get the answers that we need to go back and educate the people that we have influence over.
I think we're going to find that this year is going to have a much deeper discussion about our park investments. Other years, we've had a list. Nobody's ever completely happy with the list, or we get a list, and then we go out and we sell the list of improvements. I think the question of the role that parks play, the balance throughout our community is definitely going to get a lot more conversation. So this was an excellent opening. I want to suggest something to you, because you have to keep your messages really, really simple. If what we want is affordable living, density is a part of it, but it really only works if you've got frequent transit and you have the green infrastructure that goes with the density. So if it's easy for people to get to public space that they can use, then the density plus frequent transit, green infrastructure adds up to affordable living. Or can, I think I'm looking for our council to be more vigorous with the goals for our community, because I think this bond issue is going to bring a lot of things up, and we can't just assume that everything is smiley and we're all for it. We have to prepare for conversation. So this has been an excellent opening to that. And if this committee is willing to continue and talking with one another, I think that'll be helpful.
And thank you. And I will say, just connecting back, we do have about 10 more minutes in our time. This would be both a great topic for our COMCOM conversations. This would be a separate breakout where we could have a full in-depth. This is going to be really tough to capture in just a few minutes here. And I think it'd be also an excellent topic for our equity group, because we could put together a response from the committee on an article or talking points about this. So I'd just like to thank you, Simone, for bringing this up. Obviously, this is a timely point to bring here, and I'm glad we could have this. There are some good places in our kind of upcoming year about that. And Lauren, I see you wanting to get in.
That's
Sorry.
okay. I think Kate put it in the chat. We are working on getting some information and talking points put together. As mentioned, this is a little bit bigger than just a Dix Park response. And so we really want to do our due diligence to work with the planning team and department who's been leading the EDGE study, and work with the city communications office, and just kind of make sure we have a really well-rounded talking points to get back on this issue, and different folks that others could reach out to for specific information, which all maybe doesn't live necessarily with us at the Dix Park team. But I do really appreciate you bringing it up. It is something that's been very much to the forefront of kind of what I've been seeing bounce around in communications, on social media, and the news. And so I want, to Jay's point too, this committee is one that should be well informed, and it's our responsibility to help do that. And so I want to get back to this group with that information, and would love to have a conversation around it a little more robustly, and maybe we can prepare a little bit for that so that we've got more to share too.
Well, Brody, why don't we book that as our first topic? Easy to do. We could set that up for February and break this group off. Thanks for folks for questions and thoughts here. We'd love to have you join us for that. In our remaining time, any final questions about task forces? Our plan as last year, we'd like to do a sign up form for our task forces. It'll talk about what it means to be in a task force, the extra expectations and time and involvement, and allow you to provide preferences of interest. So we encourage everyone, if you're interested in our list of the offerings this year, that you filled out that form. We'll be sending that out in an email. But any final questions about our task forces? We talked a lot about a couple of them, but maybe didn't get questions on all three, or also our focus areas for the year. Any kind of final thoughts here?
Nick, I know you said we're not going to do updates in these quarterly meetings and that refer to the newsletters that we get on our emails, but sometime in some format, could y'all do an update like on the stone houses, the timeline for Plaza and Play, what's happening at the creek, and the environmental studies and the railroad, things like that we haven't heard about lately, or at least not since December.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. We'll do that.
I would say, can I just say real quickly, sorry, not to belabor it, but I think if there are ideas or concerns that you guys are hearing, please send them to me and I can compile those and get that to the staff. That way they have something to go from. I'm happy to be that conduit for y'all.
Thank you, Shona. Brody, it may not be necessary to put this final slide up. It had about 4 words on it. Some of those, we're going to put a survey out for your interest. The other thing is Brody's been sending some information about our upcoming volunteer opportunity that is shortly upcoming in the next couple of weeks. This was our reschedule from our attempt of last year, but we really hope folks are able to get out to the park for those of us who feel comfortable doing so. I believe it's invasive removal in the creek area, so it should be fun, hands dirty type of day. Brody, is all that information sound right?
Yep, absolutely. And I'll be there. So if anyone wants to party and remove invasives, let's go. September 5th, 9 to
Are you
12.
bringing baked snacks?
February 5th. Good idea. I might.
I mean, that would get me there.
Noted.
We got inspiring bakers, right?
Same,
What's
Shauna. I show up if there's snacks.
What's the date?
February 5th,
Thanks.
9 to 12.
What's on the menu? Privet? What kind of plants?
There will probably be a lot of privet. There's some of the bigger things. We recently did a Bartlett pear intervention. So
I'd be happy to help with that.
Yeah.
I hate
so
those things.
we've got some things we need to deal with. Lee Bergassa with our invasive group is putting all that together. So
Time to hire the goat patrol.
need to bring back the goats. Yep.
Jay, if you wouldn't mind closing us out today, it's great to see everyone. I'm glad we're able to get this committee back together and looking forward to seeing you hopefully on the 5th, but shortly after. So Jay.
Yeah, no, thank you guys again. I really appreciate everybody. Like Shauna said, if you have any concerns, please send them her way. She can be an awesome resource to aggregate that or reach out to anyone that you have a comfort level with. And we will continue to figure out the best way to move this park forward into 2022 and hopefully eventually into a post-pandemic space where we can gather. So stay safe, get boosted, do what you need to do, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.